ethnic group owes him anything. Now the tune has changed and he now appears keen on collecting what he sees as an old debt owed to him. The responses have been swift and the Senate appears to be under siege. Later, the word riparian remains a challenge. Our show tonight begins on a slippery note. But first, my take. All right, a fortnight ago, Parliament, specifically the National Assembly, released the second report on the sugar crisis. Now, 20 sittings later, 4 cabinet secretaries, 1 principal secretary, top officials of the Kenya Revenue Authority and the Kenya Bureau of Standards, it was, in the words of Parliament, a poor quality job. Now, it discloses nothing. They set their own questions and answered them. In their words, it was a waste of taxpayers' money. To begin with, 38 members of the Joint Committee on Agriculture and Trade drew in more than 2 million shillings in the 2-week period they sat and came up with nothing. Their mandate narrowly was to find out what kind of sugar Kenyans consumed and whether it was safe for consumption. At this point, let me pause and ask some questions. What was their role? Did they understand it? If they did, what did they do with that opportunity? They were supposed to tell the country if the sugar was contaminated with mercury or any other contaminant. They were also supposed to determine the legality or lack of it of the sugar imports. Now, they did not do any of that. To make it worse, they allegedly took some such as 10,000 shillings in bribes to sell the entire country. Clearly, not even to the highest bid, I must say. Because they failed, technically, when Parliament rejected the report, there are proposals now to take it to the Senate. That's because the National Assembly cannot touch it now, not until 6 months elapse from the time it was rejected. Not forgetting members of the Joint Committee and the plenary are also accused of bribery to defeat the report. Well, that's a story for another day. The circus can only lead us to one conclusion. Kenyans have been hoodwinked. The fight against contraband has been politicized. Now, politicians appear to be pulling all the strings. The joke, sadly, is on us, and sadly also with commodities regularly used in every household. In the words of Henry Kissinger, who controls the food supply controls the people. Now, who controls the energy can control the whole continent, and he who controls money can control the world. My guests tonight, David Osiany, Joseph Simeha, Gabriel Muduma, and Charles Munyoi. Good evening, my name is Ken Mijungu. Sidebar begins right now.
We therefore request the Speaker of Senate to convene the Powers and Privileges Committee and to summon Francis Mburu and his sidekicks to substantiate the allegations of impropriety. We recommend that action be taken against any senator who may have breached parliamentary privilege. Similarly, firm action should be taken against Francis Mburu if these allegations are unsubstantiated and are found to be in contempt of Parliament. We have caught their hands in the cookie jar. We shall not be intimidated to silence by suspected thieves. Corruption fights back, but we are ready to fight to the end.
I have letters showing that I never surrendered. But some people want to capitalize on that. My enemies, they want to capitalize, but now I've refused them to capitalize, so they are making all kind of publicity in this country. There's somebody who demanded 82 million. If I don't pay, I'll be as famous as Waiguru. You understand?
Right, at Ken Mijungu at NTV Kenya, our SMS line is 20686. Send us your feedback. We'll be sampling some of them. All right, gentlemen, I know I've been accused of not having a lady today, but I'm glad to see you. Let the ladies eat today, right? Let's start from right there. The Senate is out defending itself, right? And none less than the position of the chairperson, Senator Moses Kajwang. I mean, it's been said to have been a good job, a really good job. But the fact that these new allegations that they were asking for 100 million shillings, of which Mburu says he can substantiate. They even say they gave the DCI a video. We yet to see it as the media. It's not yet hit at least our media house. But let's start from there. The Senate has been put to its defense? Let me begin with Joseph.
Well, I'm not surprised that the Senate is being put to its defense, given what we witnessed in Parliament not too long ago. But perhaps what we may need to go into, I hope, in the course of this discussion is whether really Parliament, meaning Senate at the National Assembly, have what it takes, have the gravitas actually to go to the bottom of this sugar issue. Because, we may be talking about, we may be blaming people who really do not have what it takes, even if they wanted, even if at a very personal level they wanted to go to the bottom of this issue. We may be talking about people who have no capacity to go to the bottom of this issue. But we're made of lawyers,
they're made of doctors, accountants.
It's not about their technical ability, it's about who and what is behind this sugar crisis.
Okay.
So, some of these things could be too hot for MPs to touch.
Okay.
Yes.
For various reasons.
Yes.
We talk about sugar or we talk about Roraka? Which are we talking
about? No, let's talk about sugar and Roraka. It's the same thing.
Right.
The reports are out, yes. But Roraka specifically because of Kajwang.
Well, then we have to wait for the DCI or whoever he says he gave the video to.
But I want that exchange, the fact that they've been put to their defense on the Roraka land.
They've already given their report, as far as I'm concerned. And they've made recommendations. All right, we need to see that followed. Now, they've been put to task that they asked for money. Can that be substantiated? What can I want us to run away from this evening and probably the weeks to come? We should deny stupidity a platform. And that we should do it fully well knowing that there are so many knowledgeable people listening to these people talking out in the media. If you say this is what happened, if you can substantiate that claim, if you say so-and-so asked you for 2, 3, 4 million, substantiate the claim.
Okay.
But this nonsense of you saying, they asked, I'll give it out, I'll remove it.
What are you waiting for? It's not the first time he's saying that.
Have substantiated
but
it
he said
by
they
now,
provided
Ken.
the details to the DCI.
Then let's wait and see.
But it doesn't stop us from discussing it.
No, I'm not saying it should stop us from discussing it.
Yes.
But I would have expected somebody like that to have already moved an inch higher because that report has actually been brought out to the fore. What are you waiting? Release it. If he had anything genuine, and I can guarantee you here now, and I stand corrected, I don't think he has anything.
You sure? Okay.
Ken, I think reality is we have very nice men and women in that house, in those two houses of Parliament, Senate and National Assembly, coming in the heels of what had happened with the National Assembly, where people were accused to get 10,000, 20,000 shillings on the other report. I think this is not something we should take lying down.
Okay.
Importantly, we are saying it's not everyone who is not doing their work properly, but the guys who are in there asking for this kind of money, those are the ones that
100 million shillings for four senators.
These are people who are supposed to exercise that thing called oversight, and what they are doing is not really oversight. Theirs is to go in there and collect as much as they can from these individuals that we have a problem with as a country. And I think if we are able to sort out and ensure Parliament follows in the footsteps of every other Kenyan in terms of fighting corruption, if we manage to do that as Kenyans by way of making as much noise as possible against them, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect to the good guys in those two houses, then the moment we do that, we'll be able to go very far. But the bottom line is this is not the beginning. And trust me, if you look at where the chains or the rope is heading, in terms of the individuals, when it comes to the Roraka land, when it comes to the land issues, you'll find someone is being tagged somewhere, right within that particular house, either Parliament, National Assembly or the Senate.
Okay. Regardless of how you look at it, from the point that you have a report that is touted as very credible, in fact, they said Senate did quite a good job. The fact that something Spanish thrown into the works and now you're talking about bribery, I mean, Osiai.
Ken, I've been here long enough to understand that corruption fights back. But I've also been here long enough to understand that many a man have a price. We so shamefully, and the parliamentarians who are enlisted on the newspapers have not taken the honor of that publication to court. So it means it may be held as a substance and fact. We saw when parliamentarians who take home after their allowances almost 1.5 million would stoop too low to take 10,000 shillings. I come from a sugar belt, but I also know that there are good men out there who can stand for what is right, who can neither be bought nor sold. We all reckon and agree, for example, that Mutula Kilonzo did a spectacular job in doing the report on the Solai Dam. Yes. And no one has raised a finger. And there hasn't been any contradiction about it. How come then that we are going to have two reports that seem to be saying two different things from two arms of the same parliament that seem to be serving different interests.
National Assembly and Senate?
I would love to hope, because I have known Moses Kajwang at a personal level. I know him as a modest man, but maybe there is something beyond what I know.
Okay.
But also, I don't want us to hang Moses Kajwang without going down to look at the facts. I remember in one of your shows during the day asking the president that where the sugar report has gotten to, where the Ruaraka land has gotten to, there's too much confusion.
Right.
We no longer know who is speaking fact and who is misrepresenting fact. So I hope that he would rely, the president, solely on the DCI, put to swear and say that the report I shall give shall serve no interest but the state and the nation.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking at all of you gentlemen and I'm thinking Fred Matiang'i will be wrong, right? I'm also looking at Bello Kipsang and I'm looking at you and I'm thinking he's also wrong. I'm also looking at Mohammed Sazuri and thinking he's wrong. And I'm also sitting here and thinking Moses Kajwang was right.
That's why I'm saying there's been too much confusion going around. We cannot substantiate.
How can four minds be wrong on one single issue?
Well, it depends the interest there.
The interest.
That's what, when I began and mix a little bit this thing of sugar and the land saga, that's what I began by. That was what was occupying my mind. Because I've tried to wrap my mind around these things, to see these things, understand what's going on. And every time when I make a serious effort, I find perhaps there is something, or there are some things beyond what we see.
Exactly.
And that is why it's not a surprise. You could have 10 men and women, and they would be wrong.
Yes, and they all say the same.
And they would be wrong, and maybe one person who's speaking differently would be right. And they would be wrong because what is it that motivated the saga we are talking about?
Exactly.
Whose interests are involved? Who is behind it? And oftentimes, these things become so convoluted. They begin with Semeha's interest, Siani's interest, Mudoma's interest. By the time we're getting to you, there are many other people behind the 3-4 of us whose interests are now completely mixed. Now you can't tell. You can't even separate. Sometimes people think it's because of, interests are limited to people from a certain ethnic group or a certain political persuasion or a certain class. By the time we've gone through this thing, eventually when the truth comes on the table and it settles, when we look at where the money went, the money from around Ruaraka land, people will be surprised. People will be totally surped in terms of the numbers and diversity of interests represented.
To just agree with what Prof, I usually call him Prof.
And tell us why there should be different interests in Parliament.
So about the sugar issue, I think, to be honest, I think parliamentarians, those that were dealing with it and those that received bribes, they let down Kenyans. I don't think there's any way we can sugarcoat it. They let down Kenyans. But also, I'll come back to it as to why they let down Kenyans. I'll come to it. But very quickly, on the Ruaraka land, we have been told by several groups, and reading the report from Senator Kajwang, he said he relied on expert advice. One of them came from the Ministry of Lands. The other came from the Ministry of Education. We still had a technical committee. We have the Nairobi County. All of them seems to be agreeing on a position. So what we need to ask is, if these four people or these groups saw something, why didn't anybody else, including Swazuri, who today I call a confident ignorant? The reason I'm using this, you remember the people in Tani, Falamanga?
Yes.
You cannot tell them anything. All right? And this is, I think, why this man has led himself, and I use this humbly, has led himself into trouble. Kenyans needed a very sober and realistic and simple answer. Like the sugar thing. Do we have contaminated sugar? That's all we needed to know. The Ruaraka deal, is this land public or private? Don't play the shenanigans. And that's why I'm saying it is better for us to help Kenyans. All right? For that parliament and that Senate and leadership to help Wanjiko understand what is at play, what is the truth, what are the facts in these scenarios.
Ken, with like I said, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect, parliamentarians, because we have very good people in there. I've always tried to go in there, but Kiambaa people never elect me. I don't know why. I think it's because I associate with
next
Muduma.
time it's not.
Bottom line, with our members of parliament, I think historically we have never had this aspect of oversight taken seriously. Right. Our members of parliament, especially National Assembly, that we were used to, were individuals that were used to giving out checks, bursary checks all over, CDF checks, literally managing CDF like it's a personal property, being all over the place, and you got re-elected based on how you manage CDF. This aspect of interrogating what is happening for purposes of oversighting is something really new. And if you ask yourself, how many reports have they done as committees in those two houses since we introduced the two houses? How many reports have had this kind of excitement around Kenya? It's only because for the first time now we are talking issues corruption. For the first time in the history of this country, Kenyans are really focusing on what's going on within the three arms of government, be it the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. And they're asking themselves, who is going to fail us? Because the executive, for the first time, you can see something is going on.
Yes.
The judiciary, a lot of things have been happening to the extent that now we even have divisions that are going specifically to be dealing with
corruption,
this. We have practice directions where we are going to micromanage what is happening to the extent that it doesn't take too long for justice to be realized. So Parliament has been left behind. They are behaving the same way they have always behaved.
Okay.
And I think that is going to be the weakest link, if you ask me. But importantly, like David has said, we have the DCI, we have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission investigating the same thing. Trust me, if someone is culpable, if someone is guilty, it doesn't matter what Parliament comes out with as an arm of government. Trust me, people will be taken to court, they'll be charged, and Kenyans ultimately will know who was wrong in that Parliament, who was not telling the truth, because they are not the only arm that is investigating.
Do you agree? Because the Powers and Privileges Committee is being tasked with that responsibility to investigate what's going in the committees, because it's not the first allegation. Gentlemen, I'd even take you back when Ababu Namwamba was chair PSC. You remember what happened? Right. But now, Raila Odinga has said that the weakest link in the fight on corruption is Parliament.
Correct.
I sat here with members of Parliament, Amos Kimunya, who said, believe me, Parliament is still the best bet. I sat here with Jacoyo Midio, who said, Kenyans, don't lose hope in Parliament. It's still our best bet.
You know, one of my favorite mantras is by a lady called Ellen Goldhamon White. The greatest want of the world is the want of men and women who can neither be bought nor sold, men and women who in their innermost hearts are true, men and women whose conscience is true to duty as the needle is to the pole. It is that caliber of men and women that I pray each day our parliamentarians would endeavor to be. Corruption has been made not to be, you know, there hasn't been any way of justifying punishment of corruption in this country until the president cracked a whip recently. It's become very common to take off with cash and, you know, disappear. And parliamentarians, those who were bought or sold, may think that it will not catch up with them, but it catches up with them in
Only
the long
if
run.
an independent someone investigates them.
No. You know, investigation may not even reveal as much as it would, because then the court will start relying on where is the evidence, how were you bought, what would you put here, is there a recording, video or audio to that effect. But if people like Samuel Arama, who were mentioned previously, in, you know, with voice recording, and court would say that, I mean, the guy just says that was a cartoon, and the courts just let him free. And this is the country we are living in. So the judiciary must also be decisive, and the presidents of the different levels of judiciary, High Court, Achode, and Court of Appeal, when empaneling benches that will listen to these cases, they know their colleagues who have a history of corruption, even though there may not be anything tangible on them. They must then empanel these benches to be benches that will be ruthless with corruption, that would want to give justice to the people. Justice at the end of it must be seen to be done. But until then, we're going to have a merry-go-round.
I think at the risk of sounding like I'm holding brief for Parliament, remember the laws we are using, the very beautiful laws that we are using to jail these guys, much as they have gaps here and there. those laws have come from the same parliament.
True.
So much as it's the weakness, in as far as I'm concerned, is that parliament being a house where we have sent our representative, be it at the national level or the county level, when it is seen like impunity, which is doing wrong and not expecting to even get punished. When it's we Kenyans feel like in parliament, you go in there, you can do anything that you want. I think sending that message at a time when we are fighting impunity, we are fighting corruption in all its manifestations. I think that aspect of sending that message to Kenyans, that parliament is a house that is so insulated. And remember, you cannot remove these guys.
Right.
Maybe we need to even talk about that.
Yeah.
You can never recall an MP. It will not happen on earth.
After 3 years,
You know,
fight,
two years, you wait for 2 years, you have to have a court order. Much as even you have a continuing issue, by the time this guy is going to parliament, maybe there was an issue that was in court, you have to wait for 24 months before you start the process. You have to get the court order, and the guy can still go back and vie when, you know.
I know. I'd like to take a break, but I want to begin with Sirisia, member of parliament. You remember the time he admitted to Andrew Chep that he's been bribed, and it was an uproar in parliament.
Yes.
Then suddenly there's the accusation of 10,000 shillings, right? And then we just have Ruraka, 100 million shillings. I mean, it's been very consistent, gentlemen. The only thing that has been consistent here is the accusations.
You know,
And the amount of money given.
I go back where I began. I think we're expecting too much.
We are expecting,
we are expecting too much, you know, from these MPs and senators.
Okay.
Parliament would be perhaps actually the most powerful arm of government when it comes to protecting public interest if the power of the people had stayed with the MPs. If MPs would make the executive shake in their boots because they've done something wrong. But Parliament has no power. When everything, when the chips are down, the power doesn't lie with Parliament. Why? Because they have been complicit in taking away power from the people and handing it over to the executive, particularly the presidency. So when chips hit the table, parliamentarians want to cover their backs, not because they're afraid of the people, that they will not elect them, but because they are afraid of him who wields power. And over time, they've been complicit in transferring this power from the
I'm going to have to say the bill.
No, just a minute. Let me just
30 seconds.
In this instance, for the first time, Parliament has the backing of he who supposedly wields the power in attempting to fight graft.
A quick one, Ken,
I would expect, therefore, that they would match up to his willingness to fight graft.
Actually, it's Parliament that took power from the President. The independent commission, including the gentleman this guy is talking about, if you want him out, trust me, tomorrow he'll be out because you only need to petition Parliament to remove it. And they recommend that the tribunal will be formed by the President, and the recommendations of the tribunal will have the guy out. It's that simple.
All right, I think we come back and discuss this for 2 minutes, right? Before we go to another topic. Stay with me. We're back. Plus your feedback coming up shortly. 20868. That's the SMS line at Ken Mijungu at NTV Kenya. We're coming back with your feedback. Stay with us because we're right back in about a minute. welcome back to Sidebar. A little bit of your feedback before we continue with our discussion right here on at Ken Mijungu at NTV Kenya at 20868. That's our SMS feedback line. All right, on Twitter we have Michael Lukun say we have done poorly in tracing a recovery of looted assets as well as punishing those involved. Of course, so 400 million versus how many billions, you know? So it's been poorly done. Okay, next. And Kanye Gecko says, how comes not a single soul has been taken ill out of mercury poisoning? Because they talked about it. They say there was no mercury, so no one, or we don't know, but it's been blamed on a lot of things, they said, including cancer probably. Some of these diseases that traditionally we didn't suffer. And finally, Kiprono Abraham says, this sugar saga is growing darker and darker every day in here. There must be something we don't know about this. Right, some of the feedback, keep them coming. We'll be sampling them before we take the next break. But gentlemen, let's go back with this discussion shortly. All of you raised your hands like you wanted to say something.
Everybody said it was my turn actually to speak. And, I was saying, we can chastise Parliament all, as much as we want. But we have to remember one thing, that a very great man once said, that tranquility of a nation is based upon the premise of a very simple truth. Nothing is important in a democracy like an informed electorate. So we must ask ourselves, how did they get to Parliament?
Okay.
And if we are to ask ourselves that, then we will notice one thing, that our way that we put these people into Parliament is flawed.
Okay.
And we must ask ourselves, why is it flawed? Is it because of the 50 bob that we get? Because really we must ask, when they get into Parliament, whose interests should they represent? Is it me or theirs? So as much as we want to take kicks, we must ask ourselves, how did they get there? And therein, Ken, I believe, lies our problem. Until we start taking that seriously, until we start questioning and setting and raising up structures to see who actually oversights Parliament. And by the way, when they want to do a good thing, they can do a good thing. We saw what they did with Chumo. Right?
Yes.
And when they sat down and said, no, we do not need to pass this guy. We don't want him to go to the next level because of 1, 2, 3. All right?
So they can do the right thing.
Of course they can do the right thing. And they don't need to be coerced by the executive or anybody else, because you know why? We did not vote. Albeit the fact that some of us may have voted wrongly, we did not vote for somebody to be following robotic instructions. That's not their work.
The day they draw the line, and know that the executive is the executive, the judiciary is the judiciary, and the legislative
Parliament can do a good job.
They do that.
They need to just rise up.
Joseph, you're quiet.
No, yeah, because when I was waiting for Muduma to finish, and there's something interesting he says, that we need to, first I agree with you, that the most dangerous thing to a democracy is an ignorant or uninformed voter.
Right.
And unfortunately, we suffer from that in this country. Majorly.
We just vote.
Yes, the voting population, even non-voting population, is majorly politically illiterate, unfortunately. And that has huge repercussions on the decisions that we make, or the decisions that are made for us, and we are so stupid that we think we are the ones making those decisions, because those decisions are made for us. I also agree in terms of the flawed system or flawed process. How do we get these people into Parliament? Not all of them though, but how do we get them into Parliament? Part of it is because of that ignorant voter and a direct consequence of their decisions and actions. But part of it, because of that ignorance, decisions are made for them, and they're foolish enough to believe that they made those decisions. That's where, unfortunately,
I must be able to say that as we talk about Parliament, it must be very clear that we do not mean all of them. However, tragically, it is the most.
You condemn it as a house.
So because this is the same Parliament that has the Mutula Kilonzo-led committee that did a stellar job, and we all agree, regardless of what side of thought we belong. When we look at this crisis around sugar, we must fundamentally ask critical questions, because now we are dealing with the end stages of this problem. We must go to the root of this problem. This cartel, where does it start from? It starts from what we believe is the research of what the demand of sugar in this country is. Someone sits, I don't know what research is done, and then they decide that the demand, the amount of sugar needed in this country is this. And then they tell us that the production of the companies of sugar in this country is so much. That may be real, because we can then have sugar companies that tell us this is the amount. Therein lies the crisis. That we say the deficit that we need to meet the market demands
is this.
Then they fix it. Then you go and call a single man who imports more than all these other companies produce, and runs these other companies out of town, leading to economic strife for those who depend on these sugar factories. Now, and that is why I've always implored that media houses should have a kitty that is given towards investigative research. It may take long, but you go to every stage from the commencement to the end, so that by the time these people are being bought for 10,000, we already know who is possibly buying the MPs at 10,000 shillings. Where has he come from? What is his history, and who are his point men?
Okay.
All right. Now you have then the Ruaraka land issue. You know, at some point we did not even know what documents to rely on. There were documents that were even missing.
Exactly.
And yet for 10 years we have kept saying we are digitizing the land system. That we are digitizing the lands department. We are digitizing the lands department.
With the Ruaraka land, for example, this report that they've always said that was supposed to be the basis where Matiang'i should have not okayed the payment for this. I haven't seen that document. Who has seen it? The document that supposedly was written by experts that advise, and Matiang'i and co disregarded this. Who's seen the document?
Have you seen the document? The crisis that we have, and I think that's why the DPP is also very not very keen to rush to court with this matter, is exactly what you're talking about. That the information that is out there in the public domain is not really supported by requisite documentation to be able to stand in court and you know have conviction. What in terms of Parliament, and I think ultimately that issue of the Ruaraka saga will sort itself out. At minimum, I am sure at minimum 1.5 billion shillings is going to come back to the government. That one I'm sure. I'm not saying trust me, it will happen, because it is the only avenue and several individuals have to escape some of this.
Okay.
But
we need to
moving quickly to the issue of the parliamentarians.
Yes.
I close it. I think Kenyans' expectations, what they expected of their leaders, is what Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is doing. Remember, those are the same voters that we are claiming are in Rwanda. They are the same guys who elected Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. They are the ones who gave Raila Amolo Odinga a lot of votes. And you can see now, combined, they are doing a lot of work. And that's what Kenyans expect of all level of members of parliament, be they National Assembly or Senate, women, and all of them.
Okay.
Now, and in as far as I'm concerned, the best way to go about this is to ensure someone should just go to court, and I hope David is going to do that, and have that provision in the Elections Act on recall declared unconstitutional.
Right.
The first article of the Constitution is very clear that sovereign authority belongs to us. You cannot take away that from Kenyans by way of ensuring you can do anything and you cannot be recalled.
It takes a lot of time. A debate for another day. Gentlemen, I like to move on, and I like to move on and discuss what's happening the last weekend. Let's listen to this first.
Jameni, tuwe wanademokrasia. Na demokrasia inasema ya kwamba asiyekubali kushindwa. Mimi nawaomba tukienda kwa uchaguzi tuheshimu uamuzi wa wananchi.
Yule kijana alikuwa anasema tio, kufanya kama umeshindwa. Usema kama wewe unakimbia peke yako. Umeshinda nani?
Osia, let's begin with you. Umekimbia peke yako, umeshinda nani?
I'll tell you what. I think it is unfair to drag the country back to where it's come from, when the people who were in contest primarily, whose names were on the ballot as the leading contenders in that contest, have decided to make amends, to bury the hatchet, to not question too many things because it becomes too complex to answer. And if the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the leader of NASA, Raila Odinga, have made amends for the sake of country, have sat and seen the gaps, have agreed that there may have been even problems in the electoral process, and that we do not need to go back and forth on who won, who did not win, and that fundamentally there are rulings that were made by the judiciary to the effect that a few things were amiss, then regardless of whoever won, which is the conclusion the two gentlemen have come to, we need to push the country forward. I think it's unfair then to draw the country back to that discussion when we have made fairly good steps so far, awaiting what the Building Bridges Initiative has for the nation.
Building Bridges Initiative is even not a dead word, probably. It's not moving forward.
No, they're
not funded. But let's just talk. Let's just talk about it. No, I think you spoke. Let me go to Gabriel. Gabriel, on this, what I'd like to know, Osiani says we don't need to pull them back. But the fact remains that they're pulling it back. They're already speaking about it. You can't ignore it.
Politicians will always be politicians, and I believe it's, you know, it was started by a banter, and I'm calling it a banter because it's, you know, if you look at how it was weighed in, I think, you know, the deputy president may have, you know, just been, you know, telling people, let's move on, let's forget what happened, and then Osiani brings in a very good part of the argument that, you know, things have actually been overtaken by time. True to the fact is that we've already moved forward. We cannot now bring in the issue of legality and legitimacy again after the handshake. And we applaud the two gentlemen, that's the president and the former prime minister, Raila Odinga, for actually moving forward to, you know, to ensure that majority of what they wanted or what they felt that Kenya went through, you know, is actually moving forward and actually will be a product. And we hope it does, you know, by, you know, bringing in the building bridges. And I hope that does happen. Finishing on that point, I think, and we need to be sober on this. We need to be sober on this. We are 1 year removed, 4 years. And I may quote somebody who was actually talking about it, and I think it was one of you in this studio, Musalia Mudavadi. He said, a year gone, we need to start asking ourselves, 4 years down the line, will we be found by the same issues that brought us here in the first place? Those are the issues we need to work on, Ken.
Okay. Let me respond to Muduma just before Simeha goes on. It is instructive to note, however, that the things that were bedeviling the processes around the election are not swept under the carpet.
Right.
That's why I'm saying,
even the handshake didn't do that?
No, the handshake did not sweep it under the carpet. No. The handshake raised fundamental issues that have bedeviled the nation, including the electoral process.
Right.
And that they promised, the two gentlemen, that the mistakes of the yesteryears up to and including the election must never be a problem going forward. And so let us be patient enough to wait and see. If they do not do that, then we can hold them to account and say, come on.
Okay.
Let's start this discussion afresh.
Okay.
Let me just say, but I'm glad that when you began the earlier time when you spoke, Kosiani, you talked about, you know, do we want to go back and talk about who voted for who? Actually, I was worried when Charles said that the voters who voted for Uhuru Kenyatta. I was almost going to say, shall we discuss that? Because I mean, and it's safer to say, okay, let's not go into that.
Yes.
Let's not discuss that. Let's discuss what is facing us now, because that is still debatable. Whether who voted for who won, who didn't win. Now, if you win an election, or you gain something by merit, say what? Say you pass an exam, or you get a degree by merit, you cannot keep reminding people that, you know, I got this degree and some of you are doubting. You know, I was #1 and some of you are doubting. You know, I passed this exam and some of you are doubting. You cannot, not even a child does that. It is only people who are unsure of themselves, who are trying to reassure themselves and keep passing a message to other people that, you know, I got this.
Okay. And yet the problem is, I also don't want to go there.
I think
you're moving out.
What was on camera, what you showed us.
In the context of the voters that elected the leaders that are fighting corruption right now. And I talked about both Raila Amolo Odinga and Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta are doing an exemplary job in the areas of cohesion and fighting corruption. I think that cannot be gainsaid. Having said that, talking about the past, taking us back to the past, every time we have an audience in charge, I think is not going to help anyone. Let us now move forward. There is a lot of work to be done. Let us address ourselves. And I would like to hear our leaders addressing themselves to matters arising. If it's about corruption that is manifested in parliament, let us hear them talking about that loudly. If it's about the MAU and all these other things, let them talk about that, not as a side issue. Let them talk about that, because that's an issue that is currently happening right now, that is affecting Kenyans right now. If it's about prices of fuel that is about to skyrocket, if it's about my electricity bills that I cannot be able to pay again, I cannot be able to sort them out. I don't know why they shut us down for a day and then they came up with this manner of charging us, where you top up and 2 minutes later is telling you haven't topped up. Whatever is it that's going on, that parliament, all these leaders should be addressing themselves to those issues. Let them not take us back.
But also, Ken, as we finish actually on that topic, like Osiani has said, we should be alive to the fact as to why that handshake, or the platform under which that handshake came. And if I may remember correctly, it was actually to dig deeper and observe why after every 5 years, our country almost comes near to burning. And I think those are some of the great issues that we need to support the building, the Building Bridges initiative, so that when they are done with the paper or the recommendations that they'll bring forth, they can be able to address that thing to finality. Remember, we are talking about 10 years, since 2007 coming to 2008. We've done really little in matters electoral reforms. So if this Building Bridges initiative can carry the weight to ensure that what they bring to Kenyans will be something that will hold weight, to ensure that we never fight again, which I believe the president pronounced himself to that. The former prime minister also pronounced himself to that. And I also believe Deputy William Ruto pronounced himself into that. Let us make sure that we deal with this ghost of election once and for all.
Can I say, you have talked about building bridges, so has Osiani and so has Meduma. Only the two of us haven't, and this is why now I come in to talk about it.
Yes.
Are you sure that we are talking about the same thing that began, I think it was on the 9th of March?
Right.
That's what we still have right now, almost September? I'm not very sure. I mean, when it began, I said I'm one of the people who came on air and newspapers and so on, in many public platforms, and said, give these leaders benefit of doubt. I think what they're saying sounds good.
Okay.
Let's see what they can give the country. How many months now down the line, I'm not very sure that we have the same building bridges. As you say, we seem to be stuck. I'm not very. When they begin by talking about holding a national conference on what? Fighting corruption? Excuse me.
It's not the same thing.
Excuse me.
Just a minute. We have to take a break. Okay. We can't finish building bridges, right? We can't finish it today. We can't build the bridge today. We can't.
It's all right.
Yeah. Let's take a few of your feedback. Then we take a break. Let me see what we have there. Right, this is also on Twitter. Michael Okun says, Kenya is a forgetful nation. NYS scandal came. We made a lot of noise and we forgot about it. The sugar and land scandal are here, and so we forget about it. Actually, that's very true. But we won't let you forget about it as a media. Devi says, other than that list doing rounds on social media, can you investigate and authoritatively tell Kenyans who these members of parliament, economic saboteurs are that receive the bribes? And lastly, how do you expect people who literally bought their positions to be certainly holy and do things religiously? They are recouping what they gave out in exchange for leadership. That's from Kiprono Abraham. Right, good place to take a break. When we come back, we still have a lot from where that came from, Yes, we're discussing that next.
Kwa sababu ile mimi niliwasaidia. Ule akakuwa prime minister, ule mwingine akakuwa deputy. Saa hii mimi ndio nimekaribia. Sasa wakiniunga mkono iko makosa. Sasa iko haja gani ya kusungukana tena? Simu nisaidie tu nifike haraka hivi. Alafu maneno
wache mambo ya kudai madeni bwana. Sisi hatuna deni lake. Tunaelewana kabisa. Lakini tunamheshimu kama Mkenya, si ndio? Na tekeleze kazi yake ya Mungu. Sasa hiyo haijulikani.
Karibu mtu anguke magoti ati anaomba Musalia Mudavadi for support.
Hayo yote lakini ulisahau 2013. Mlikuja kubomo yangu mkakula mandazi. Hiyo hakutaja.
You know, that's not the only time Mandazi brought problems. Remember during the election when it's called Antonio Lodge. You remember that guy? Mandazi. Chai. Mandazi. Yeah. Talk on Mandazi.
You guys, you didn't bring your Mandazi.
Yes. Gentlemen.
Yes.
I mean, it started, and Ruto is not stopping.
Right.
He has to remind them. You know, although they know, keep on reminding them. Let me go with Muduma.
Now, I'll tell you why I think the deputy president made that banter. To me, it's a banter. And I know it has really raised a lot of political tension and political heat, if you will. And I think why he said that is because of two things. One, he realizes NASA is gone. And he says, since Jubilee is a serious campaign machinery, he is also one of the people who formed it. He realized, I am closer to power, and that's why he invoked that if you see Musalia and look at Raila, truth be said, I'm the one close. Maybe true, maybe not, but that is the message he's trying to pass across. Now, why it is becoming bad or interpreted badly by the likes of Musalia is because of the word debt. Honestly, if I was to, like I said here last time, if I was to advise somebody, I would run away from that debt. That word debt. I would use something similar to a political favor, because the minute you bring out debt, it brings a lot of intricacies. Because somebody you say, I wasn't even there. Remember what I told you last while I was here? I told you, you have so many people coming in, Prof, every voting season, and those people have no clue what happened 5 years ago. And so when you start reminding or telling them, hey, by the way, as you go out to vote, remember we owe these people. They're like, we do not understand this.
They don't even know.
In fact, they will revolt.
Yes.
And so I think as we move forward, I would run away from that word debt. Let it be used. Get another colloquial political term.
But not debt.
But not debt.
Ken, the deputy president has a way of choosing the audience and identifying with what is happening at that particular time and making it interesting. And I think that is what he did. Very simple and straightforward. He chose that moment to say those things. But looking at how he's been campaigning, because he's been campaigning, truth be told, my honest opinion, if I was to advise him, is number one, let him do the stuff that he's saying in Western. Let him talk about that kind of that language. It's okay. But where the bulk of his votes, especially in Mount Kenya region, there are several things that he has no choice. He cannot talk about a debt. What he needs to do, because remember, he's a deputy president of under a Jubilee party. He came in on the promises that Jubilee gave. Jubilee simply and straight up has to deliver on those things that Jubilee said it's going to deliver. And William Samoei Ruto must ensure Jubilee delivers in those particular areas that they said they're going to deliver. In fact, the promises that were being made a few months ago about William Samoei Ruto being supported was about continuity. It was very clear that we need so many years so that we can deliver on these things. So it must be seen at the point where we are interrogating how much has been done. It must be seen that Jubilee has come this far. Now we need this level of continuity so that we deliver this. Okay. And that goes even for MCAs. Right. It's not just about the presidency delivering at the top. If an MCA, Jubilee MCA, is not delivering on the ground, what is going to happen is people are going to feel bad about that particular person, and they will not wake up on that particular day to vote for them.
Yes.
Voter apathy in Mount Kenya region can only affect William Samoei Ruto. He must ensure even governors, MCAs, women reps, everyone delivers on their mandate, especially if they are Jubilee elected leaders.
I mean, give it to the deputy president that he's a gifted speaker, and he has this humor around him. But I think sometimes it pays to just sit back and quickly process what you're going to say. Because you say, I'm the one who's now close, Musalia. I'm now the vice president. But if Musalia had been even more tactical, you'd say, Kalonzo, who was in your position, was very close, but you did not push him forward. Raila, who was prime minister, was very close, but you did not push him forward. And you know, when you go about talking about debt, then it becomes very complicated, because, you know, Saitoti was ordered debt by Moi. It wasn't paid.
After 14 years of...
And he was very close. Yes. And he was very close also, as I said, as vice president. And you know, Kibaki did not pay Kalonzo's debt.
Okay.
Even after grabbing him from Raila's corner. So it becomes very complicated.
Yes.
But the future, like I say, umpteen times, I'm not even exercising my mind about 2022. It's a long way. In fact, I would admonish that we stop for a moment the politics of 2022. Guys, everyone should be called to order. Focus on this thing that initially I did not seem to gel with, but as I've tried to read policy, this Big Four agenda, you know, it sounded hollow for me. But then I looked at it critically as a public policy, you know, expert, and tried to look at what we are trying to achieve. And actually, I think that quite a huge bit of it that would be impactful on the nation is achievable. So how about we rallied our energies behind it to achieve it?
Agree.
So Sian is beginning to worry me. I think you rallied.
But why?
You rallied, yes, you rallied the nation behind those Big Four agenda.
Yeah.
If you are talking about strengthening devolution to deliver those things through devolved government.
Certainly. That's part of...
Not as an agenda of
that's part of rallying the country.
Thank you. Okay,
yes.
then I won't get to worry. I watched that clip by the Deputy President before several times, very carefully listening to the words he used, and actually even went into history to check. Because he does not say that he helped Raila and Musalia to become president and deputy president. In 2007, that's what they were fighting for. They were not fighting to become prime minister and deputy prime minister. They were fighting to become president and deputy president, or vice president then at that time. And William Ruto came into ODM and became part of the Pentagon because, not because he delivered the Rift Valley, but because the Rift Valley had completely shifted. And many of the the big players in the Rift Valley had already moved to Raila's side, and William Ruto therefore had no choice but to shift. But I think he's talking about the immediate post-election period, because he's saying, look, I helped you become prime minister and deputy prime minister. It must be that there's something he did and he feels awed that it's me who ensured that you became prime minister and deputy prime minister. So that we could be discussing, imagining that he means that maybe he won votes or he mobilized voters in the Rift Valley and so on and so forth, when he means something different. So I think it's best to understand him when he talks like that.
Okay, gentlemen, I think we can belabor on that.
Yes.
Let's talk about one more thing here. Let's talk about what's happening in the I want to talk about the riparian land. But first, let's just mention briefly the fact that last week, members of parliament plagiarized a report from Russia. Only, I mean, the whole report was plagiarized. And how much money did they spend? I here have some graphics. Let's take a look at this. All right, these are the pictures of the members of parliament when they were in Russia. And tragically, James Orengo was among them. Mohammed Ali, we see them.
That's Senator.
But like, all of them, they were in Russia, you know. And then they came here and provision of refreshments and snacks for funds, refresher courses for security personnel, building of new world-class hotels, high luxury tour buses. Those were in the report. They recommended at the end of their tour in Russia. All right, gentlemen, just brief comments on this as those graphics are running. Simeha, let me start with you. Just briefly, we need to move to something else. Yes.
Okay, very well. Again, I would say just no surprises. I think is that we
what do you mean no surprises?
I keep insisting on a serious note. I keep insisting that we expect too much of our energy. I keep and I'm very serious about this. Yes. What did you expect of a lot of these people? And with all due respect, as Osiani said earlier, that I do know that there are some very credible individuals in parliament, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate, but they are in the minority. But most of them, beginning with their leadership, most of their leadership, you know, it's nothing to write home about.
Okay.
So when they go to Russia and do that, I'm not surprised. I do not even want us to waste precious time
discussing that. That's why I say we just mentioned it. And I'm just interested in the part that they plagiarized the report.
It's an all new law, I think. You know, seriously.
What do you mean new law? Everyone does it.
A report. A report. You know, I can understand if Prof. No, I understand if Prof.
He does
it. If I get, you know, one of his papers and I say, you know what, I cannot think beyond. Let me plagiarize his report. I can not his report.
Then why
actually.
benchmark?
Why do that?
Listen, you're talking about a big academic paper, not a small report like the one we saw. I mean, it's a no-no. But I had somebody. Hang on a minute. I had somebody saying, yeah, and it's very good. I actually talked to one of the MPs who was in Russia. I said, so what was it all about? They were talking about, you know, how to bring in, you know, crowd control and everything. You know, how to make these big events. And I'm like, listen, Russia should actually learn from you guys during election. You people fill stadiums. Russia should come to Nairobi and see how you bring in crowds. You cannot tell me that you went to benchmark to tell people, you know, how to deal with big crowds. You guys you are with it, as they say in the colloquial language. So I mean, it was a note for me. It was a new law.
I am one person who believes I have a problem, with a lot of respect to the chairman of the Parliamentary Service Commission, the speakers. I think it is wrong to have the speaker heading the Parliamentary Service Commission, and I think that's a serious observation. Just like it would be wrong if the president was heading the Public Service Commission.
That's interesting.
Just like it's wrong for the Speaker of the County Assembly to head the County Assembly Board, and just like it is very wrong for the Judicial Service Commission to be headed by the Chief Justice. Because this money that we are talking about came from the Parliamentary Service Commission. If the Speaker was not leading that, the Speaker who is elected by members of Parliament, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect to the Speaker, someone I respect a lot, we need now to have individuals that can be held to account. The Speaker should be holding the Parliamentary Service Commission to account and other organs of government. We cannot have individuals who travel all the way down there to come back with a report that already was there in the books. I think it's very wrong. They should have told us they went there to enjoy themselves and they had a good time, and they didn't even have time to write that report. You cannot tell me, Mudhuma, with a lot of respect, that you can copy-paste a report and all of us will be very...
I'm saying you have to give it.
We not allow you to condone that.
No. It's that's why I'm calling it a new law. I mean, how low can you get?
Yes.
You know.
Oh, a new law.
L-O-W.
L-O-W.
Well, it comes from the shrub. So,
Let me say this. That first, I have a problem as an academic, not to the extent of Simeha maybe, but in quite my own right. I have a problem with our education system. You walk into our universities today and look at the quality of research done, my friend, you will feel sorry for the people who come out of some of those institutions. Primarily because I think our lecturers are not motivated, and when they are not motivated, they then have no time to even take basic papers and dump it into Turnitin and see the level of plagiarism in it. We go on about life, able to grab something from someone, quote it and bandy it out there as our own knowledge, knowing that there will be no repercussions to it. Secondly, I have a problem with our reward system for exemplary parliamentarians. We have none. So we know that we have exemplary parliamentarians over the years. Some have retired, some have even died, but we never truly honored exemplary parliamentarians. Why can't NTV, if no one else can start this, why can't NTV start an exemplary parliamentarians award so that we set an example for our children on what a good parliamentarian is, and why we say they are so. But thirdly, there's an issue of conscientiousness. Our parliamentarians, most of them, again, not all, have taken their conscience, put it under the carpet, stepped on it, stood on it, and shouted over the din of the crowd that seeks reform that we do not care. It's an issue of conscience that we can go knowing very well that it is expected of us as parliamentarians. And when we go to learn. And we learn something that the previous year had not learned. That's why we are sent. And we have the audacity to come back, pick what the previous report said,
And put it out
Copy
there.
it word for word, 85%. And we are paid for it. I hope and expect that the Parliamentary Service Commission is going to be fair to Kenyans and demand that all the parliamentarians who went on that trip are going to reimburse the amounts that they were given to travel. I know it may not happen, but I want them to start from there.
Good place to end that discussion. Gentlemen, we're running out of time. Let's discuss about the riparian land. Right? And I know it's been discussed. It's been discussed, but just also this briefly, because it's something that touches key and core. You know, now last week we were in Mombasa. Everyone watched what happened. You know, and sadly, the reason why I want to talk about this is the fact that NEMA, a public institution, decided on a night that everyone had seen that Western Hotel Limited was a contractor. Let's listen to this.
One of the building and the director.
I cannot say the owner because that will have to search. Today we've come to look at the encroachment. Really, the ownership or the work does not really concern us.
Where we stand here, this is an elevated, it's almost 10 feet high compared to the rest of the beach. Okay? It is unusual for an ordinary investor to order the guards and rough up 2 photojournalists of the nation. That's why all these things are happening.
No. Yes.
This thing of riparian land and the demolitions and so on, I think what the question you should be asking ourselves is, does Uhuru Kenyatta, because I think this is coming from him, I hope, actually I should say I hope it's coming from him, does he have the guts to go all the way? Or is it going to be like the sugar thing? You begin by wanting to pull down the Somali sugar racketeers, and the whole thing turns dry, and suddenly it's at your doorstep. And then you get stuck. Are they going to go the whole hog? Is Sonko going to go the whole way and do what he's saying he would do? Or he'll begin to discover that Waititu's wife is also in there on this other thing, and so-and-so's wife and so on, and therefore they have to pull back. What I'm saying is, I am not sure, I am so uncertain that they have the courage. It would be fantastic, by the way, if they were to go all the way and ensure that the mistakes that have been made in this country for many years are corrected, and of course it's going to hurt people. The same way those mistakes are also hurting many more people. So you have to be prepared to hurt a number of these individuals, some of whom are powerful and so on, but these are a few private interests other than the many more Kenyans who are hurting because of those mistakes. Okay. So what really matters in this riparian land demolitions thing is whether those behind this move are going to go the whole hog. I have my doubts as to whether they'll actually do that.
Honestly, I could not agree more with what Prof has said. And you know, it starts well, but then all of a sudden it loses momentum. But you see, when you're talking about riparian land, you're not talking just about the land within our urban areas. Yeah. I told you earlier on, you know, Butali, the factory, yeah. I mean, people are saying it's now actually dipping poison into the rivers, you know, and it's affecting both human and livestock. What are we going to do about it? You know, do we set, I mean, what is NEMA doing about it? And the minute we start, or, you know, moving to the extent of demolishing buildings, all right, is to say you're ready to take this fight. And by the way, there's so much support the president is receiving for taking this issue head on. Now, I am not saying, neither do I mean that it's going to be an easy thing. I mean, but for him to be seen, to ride on it until the wheels fall off, it will require a lot of support and goodwill from Kenyans, which I believe he has. Remind every Kenyan the goodwill, not only the goodwill, but also the support. Okay. That is what the president will need, and the leadership. Question is, like Semeka has asked, are we ready? Is the leadership ready to go the final, you know, the final home? Are they ready? This is something we have to
This reminds me of what Obasanjo did when he was elected, not when he took over Nigeria as a military commander then. He constituted a small committee and said we have to straighten Nigeria. And the first casualty was him. Yeah. Yes. They destroyed his home. Yes. And then you don't have the moral authority and come back and say, you know, you can't destroy it. Because he's
it is going to be, you know why it's going to be painful, Ken, very quickly. You know why it is going to be painful? It's not me and Semeka doing it. Let Semeka try building a gate. Is a home. Several people will be there asking all these kinds of questions. So the people who have systematically built on land that's not supposed, or places where they are not supposed to be built, they are not the common type, me and you.
Exactly.
No, they are people with very deep pockets. So that's why you hear Semeka asking, are they ready? Because they are going to step on so many people's... The president pronounced himself to it. I received so many phone calls. I've lost friends. Is he willing? The fact that we've seen him losing friends, and he's ready to lose friends, kudos, Mr. President. We salute you on that one.
Ken, I think I'll go back to the definition of impunity. Doing something that ordinarily would result in punishment, but you know you'll not get punished. And I think that's where we are. And again, looking at that again, I'm looking at the statute of limitation in as far as some of these things are concerned. We've seen buildings that have been in existence for 30 years, that were approved more than 30 years ago. If an individual that approved that building was 50 at the time they were approving the building, that means they are 80 years and they are relaxing at home. If they are still living, they are back home, and then you drag that individual to court on a matter that he had even forgotten. And I think that's a message that the president is sending, that it doesn't matter how long you did this, there's no statute of limitation in terms of when we can take you to court. Looking at what is happening, so he's looking at the past, the things that have happened in the past few years back, and what is happening currently, and working on this so that people can start seeing the need to do the right thing at the right time. And I think that is why even with all these things that we are talking about lifestyle audit, because we have had middle-level managers and officers of government doing all manner of things. If without those middle-level managers, those procurement officers, those individuals that receive goods that are procured and say they have been received even when they have not been received, those are finance and accounting officers that pay for stuff that they know are not delivered. Those bank managers that give out money to individuals that just walk in and walk out in sacks of money without any punitive measures happening to them individually and the corporate in terms of the bank itself. So if we can be able to stop that, slow down that, then the aspect of impunity will be dealt with. And the moment we deal with impunity, even this issue of riparian, people now have started to understand. We did not even know whether it's 30 meters. Everyone has been assuming it's 30 meters, and then you go 30 meters from the river. And you've seen a lot of confusion going on because this has never happened before. We have never seen buildings coming down. But I think it's not really about today. It's about moving into the future. We must appreciate that whatever it is that you do, 100 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it might come haunting you. Whether you are the approving officer, whether you are the person who sold that particular item to that, the land to that particular individual, because those ones will also be followed. Because what will happen is you'll find most of these facilities, most of this land has been sold 3-4 times. So when you're going for the fourth guy, it's like you're witch hunting them. But that's unfortunate. Okay. But I think that punitive aspect is going to help us deal with matters impunity.
Let me wear my hat of being UNEP's young environmental envoy at this point, as I speak about riparian lands. I bet a lot of our listeners do not understand how important these riparian stretches are to themselves. They do not know that they basically determine the balance, the chemical, physical, and biological balance between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystem.
Please say that in English.
Yes. They just do not understand that it determines so much going on in the water as it does going on land. Yes. And that it gets back to even simple things as oxygen supply. When you stifle and take away a riparian, parcel, you have affected both the animals living in the water and the human beings walking on the surface because of that simple act. And I've seen people decrying the demolition of these buildings. They're saying you're rendering people jobless, which is a legitimate concern. But I have argued, you're talking about rendering these people jobless. What is worse? Jobless now with the opportunity of looking for a job, or these buildings whose foundations are in swamps, sinking with everyone and killing all of them? Right. What had we rather? And I think the president deserves commendation. Commendation because at least he has started. He may not finish it. It may get complicated for him. The collateral damage may become too much. Right. But thank the man who starts a step, though he may not finish it, someone will conclude it.
Right.
And we must appreciate, because those of you in the know that one of the greatest buildings brought in town was a building owned by a former member of parliament who was the Jubilee chief campaigner in Gusiland. Or so it is believed. Okay? That's Southend Mall. It means I'm not going to spare you just because you sought votes from me, sir. This is it. It's wrong.
Okay.
And I want us to try our very level best to put pressure. I asked the Greenbelt movement to help Kenyans by enlisting all the property on riparian land. Since that's what we are focusing on now, we will come to land grab from government and many others, and it will be a casualty. Dung report has everything in that. But now that we're talking about riparian land, let's follow through with who are the owners of these parcels. Where are they? Whoever it is, whether it's a former governor or a sitting leader, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, appreciate the man who says,
let's begin.
Over these few weeks, I have lost so many friends. I am willing to lose many more, because I lose one, I'll make one in Simeha.
Not one.
Not one. Hundreds of friends. Yes.
Shall I just quickly add that yes, I do agree that actually destroying these buildings is serving much more than just the act of removing them from riparian land.
Exactly.
Because it's also destroying certain myths, long-held myths in people's minds.
Yes.
And especially in ordinary people's minds.
They are untouchable.
Oh, so that can actually come down.
Right.
Because even when tomorrow we discover that the one bringing it down, his building is also on riparian land, it is these masses who should demand
that it comes
that
down.
Well, the same way those other buildings came down, yours must also come down. But I just cautioned that as we go into it, I think we need to be aware of the role impunity capital has played in putting people in political positions and sustaining them in those positions. When we look at, I'm sorry to go back to the sugar thing and liken it to this, you don't stop, and I agree with you, then these guys need a fund for investigative journalism.
Yes.
You don't stop at sugar, MPs, importers and whatnot.
No, go to the
You
roots.
find that the banks behind financing this sugar,
Yes.
that's where the rubber hits the tarmac.
Okay.
No, but because more than that, I think we need to appreciate that the country is not going to appreciate entirely what's going on with the riparian land until we have public education. Get environmental experts, give them let them explain why every country needs all the riparian tracts protected, defended.
And by the way, Ken, very quickly, you must also look into the economic disturbance. One architect said that every time we have flooding due to the construction by the riparian land, every year the country suffers between 30 to 40 billion. So we are talking about serious amounts of money. The other thing, it's not only riparian. You're also talking about buildings that have not been approved. You saw what is going on between Sonko and the guy in Gigiri. That place, if you hear what the Gigiri association is saying, they have been calling, they have been wondering who gave you the approvals to build, such
more than
a massive hotel. Exactly. So those are some of the things. We wish we had the phone call between Sonko and Waitito. And that's what really tells me.
Gentlemen,
Waitito should know better. Honestly, they're
expecting too much.
Exactly. No, he should know better. He should know better. They should know better, these guys. He's been in city council. He should know that. Going with the building that he's doing.
Sonko in that call admits that you can actually build in this city without approval.
Yes.
And yours will be approved after it's built.
Yes.
I think on that basis alone, that building should have been brought down.
No, that's what I'm saying. I understand that the building is asking. They're expecting too much.
Yes. The building was not illegal. The fact that the building was going up without approval. Gentlemen, I'd like to give you an opportunity to close. But first, let's take a look at our cartoon of the week. Then you have brief comments, 30 seconds each. Then I give you an opportunity to close. Let's take a look at this.
Sugar.
Oh my God.
Who's going to start on that?
Oh, you've taken that back to Parliament.
Yeah, just quickly comment on
this. There's something that Osiani talked about, the education in our country. And I think, Osiani, one thing we have to be alive to the fact that most of our members of Parliament, or so I suppose, many of them have actually been outside. They've been educated overseas. So we would not expect, for them to think, probably, and this I'm saying with all the respect of those who've been educated locally, like most of us. But for there to be a flaw in what you've just said, we need to question what happens after they get that great education. When they come here, what happens? Does the thought process change? And that's why Albert Einstein tells us, education is the ability of the human mind to think. And a very good friend of mine, Dr. Shorion, moves it a little bit further when he says, education is also the ability of the human mind to look at her environment, questioning it and observing it deeply, to know the opportunities that lies within, and then knowing which ones of those opportunities to embrace as a matter of supreme urgency and importance. Now, if these guys cannot do that, even with 4 PhDs and whoever has gone abroad, if they cannot be able to fight and give us better solutions to our problems, even with those PhDs, I still call themselves illiterate.
I think those are members of parliament taking some real sugar. I don't think it's all of them, but I think what members of parliament must do, they must ensure that getting elected is not expensive. They have the powers to do that. We have a law, campaign financing law, that is very clear on how the amount of money that you can spend in a campaign. And if that is implemented to the letter, just like we implement other laws, then we will not have this kind of problem, because you will know Siani can only spend 200,000 shillings to win this thing. It's not about the money he dishes out to individuals. If our members of parliament can ensure these things happen, Harambes, the law is very clear. You're not supposed to conduct Harambes 1 year to the elections. Why don't you even move further to 2 years to elections, so that by the time you're coming to elections, people have forgotten the amount of money you contributed. That way you'll slow down on, this thing of wanting to go in there to reclaim or get what you spend. I think, to me, it is within their mandate. They have a very important role in terms of legislation. We need those laws amended and others, fresh ones coming in. They have a very serious role of oversight, which you've seen them, some of them exemplary performing, like you've quoted our colleague Mutula Kilonso Jr. They have the all-important role of representation. The issues that we have on the ground, they are the ones to come up with them and bring them so that we can. And remember, especially the National Assembly. National Assembly is such a serious parliament, or rather house. Because even in terms of legislation, they cut across. They can legislate on even matters that are fundamentally county government functions. So I think, to me, they need to style up. They need to come, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect again to the members who are doing an exemplary job. If they can be able to do that, then this will be the last time we see cartoons of that nature.
Okay. I think the cartoon captures the feeling of many Kenyans, which is that as parliamentarians have been mudding themselves and taking cheap bribes, there is a general feeling that the political leadership has been quiet. They have attempted to talk, but they've not been vicious against this sugar menace in the country. That's what is depicted there, at least. There hasn't visibly been, that zest and vigor in trying to pursue the actors in the sugar mess and the cartels therein. Okay. Everyone seems to be glossing over it and not going full throttle. But back to what Gabriel said. Yes, our parliamentarians may have enjoyed the privilege of having education outside this country and should then borrow. I mean, that does not mean the education in this country is not good. Right. We still have stellar professors. Right. They may not be motivated enough. We still have stellar professors. We have ingenious Kenyans who do not need to go to the UK or to US to think. Right. However, education must not just help us pass exams, which tragically what it has done to students here and those who even go out of the country to study. Right. Education must be a tool that helps us to critically think and to generate solutions to the crisis that bedevil the country and the citizenry. Until it has done that, it's worthless.
What Osiani says about higher level leaders not seeming to have, I would say, the courage maybe to speak about this sugar issue as they ought to.
Yes, as they ought to. They are trying, but not as they ought to.
I think we will get an answer when we have that fund for investigative journalism. Yeah. I think they began this crackdown on illicit goods, contraband and so on, without thinking about the end game. And initially, actually, Rai cheered. He cheered this. He said, yes, they should go ahead and stop this thing and make. And suddenly, it was Rai's go-downs being raided, and then things began to change. So when some of our leaders begin to feel the heat through all the various patronage networks, it becomes difficult for them to speak. They catch a cold, and it becomes difficult for them to to speak. Let me finish this thought by looking at the side of the MPs in that cartoon. I actually wish to look at them as MPs from the sugar belt.
Yes.
From where I come I come from.
From where we both come from.
Yes. Now this, you heard of the saying, you heard of the words nice or good idiots. We've got a lot of them in leadership where I come from. Because they have an opportunity on the floor of parliament to speak about these things of sugar decisively, to strike a blow, even if that report will get thrown out, but to take their time and strike a blow at the heart of it. But they will not. But in press conferences, in funerals, I think it's what's his name who put a tweet. Okay, his name is disappeared. In funerals and so on and so forth, they are loudest, including some whom we know. It's matter of public knowledge that they help bring down sugar factories, and that's the money they used to come first time to parliament. They don't speak in parliament. But they're in Western Kenya, and they're making a lot of noise.
I was wondering, is it time we get something similar to what America call FDA, Food and Drug Administration? Is it the high time we put up a body like that will just ensure anything that comes into this country, mainly?
But we have failed.
Those guys have failed.
I think it's the people who have failed, not the institutions.
Yes, not the institutions.
Not the lawyer.
All institutions at the end of it
are
run by human beings.
Yes,
so those human beings have no conscience, have no heart,
and at least move that from parliament.
Meaningless.
We are out of time. You have 30 seconds each to conclude the discussion. 30 seconds. I'll cut you short. You're quiet. Let me begin with you, Sianya. 30 seconds.
I'm the nice one. I'm the one who can exit the time that I'm allocated. Let us deal with corruption, Kenyans, and I think this is the honors is with Kenyans to ensure what we are fearing that Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta might not have the energy to continue with this is not true. I want to believe he's committed to this, and the fact that Kenyans have joined him in this fight, in whichever manifestation, I think it's going to succeed. It is upon Kenyans, incumbent upon them, to ensure that nobody forgets that corruption is a bad thing, by way of shouting loudest, whether it's social media, talking to Ken, talking to all media houses, and ensuring that we are constantly reminded that if we don't deal with corruption, with precision, and deal with it and give it a major blow, then all these other things that we are talking about 5 years later, we still be mark timing on the same spot.
Great. Hussein.
I want Kenyans to
30 seconds.
Read and look at the Building Bridges document, which may be taken for granted because maybe it hasn't gained traction as we had hoped. Because therein lies what bedevils this country. Those 9-10 points, read through, at the heart of it is a fight against corruption. And one would easily attribute the handshake the fight against corruption to the handshake. I want us to further support the president in attempting, and together with the former prime minister, in their onslaught on corruption. But I must also urge them to just keep on keeping on. There will be collateral damage as they do that. There will be friends and foes alike who will get hurt in this process. It will be heavy on them. But that is how Corazon Aquino left a mark in Philippines. Let us each do our bidding at our levels, even as they meet their very own at their own levels.
Well, in matters of corruption, I'll agree with the two gentlemen. I think Kenyans have realized, and the mood is right, Kenyans have realized that they've been subjected to being prey for far too long. And they've realized, you know what, we need to arm ourselves, whether it's through supporting the government initiative and, be direct to, the issues that are ailing them. They've realized we need to ensure that once we arm ourselves with the requisite knowledge, guess what, the predator will go hungry. And that is what they need to do. Apart from that, as we support the president, the Building Bridges initiative and everything else, corruption should be on everybody's side. Why? Because as we talk about the good things about the Big Four and every other development initiative, corruption stands as one of the indicators that may actually ensure those things don't happen.
I just pick up at on the same thing of corruption and finish with one other point. First of all, my expectation is, and my prayer actually is, that what is going on with regards to the fight against corruption raises Kenyans' expectations. That it actually raises expectations, so that where it is not happening, where we don't have DPP chasing after people, like in the counties where there's a lot of corruption going on, we do it in ourselves. Right. I and colleagues are doing it in Vihiga County. We're saying we will not wait for DPP. we will demand, and we will insist, and we will run the governor out of office unless he does the right thing. So I expect that this raises people's expectations, so that they don't stop at saying no. That if this job is not finished by those who started it, citizens must finish it. Okay. And finally, they must stop people who refuse actually to entertain people who are talking about elections in 2022. In fact, in my opinion, elections, unless things change radically, and they better do, cannot be an option for making leadership choices under the current circumstances. Unless, again, citizens refuse to entertain this nonsense about 2022 and say, use these opportunities we have here to fix this country, and then we can talk about elections.
But I think there is the only addition to DPP, DCI, and ESCC that the president must now rope in is the Auditor General. Okay. The Auditor General has already done investigations about who was stolen. Okay. Make him your friend. Nab these people and let us see that something has happened.
Great, gentlemen. Thank you. We can't finish everything. Let's take a look at some of the feedback just briefly. We won't have a lot of them now because we have run out of time. Let's see what you have there. Right, that's Roy Odhiambo. Kenyans today have confirmed that William Ruto avidity is high, whilst his boss Raila Odinga are busy trying to find solutions to this country's problem. He's busy yelling on podiums how we want to become 2022 buildings. That's from this also. William Ruto talk on 2022 politics will derail Uhuru's agenda for achievement, especially on the universal health care, which actually is picking up in a good number of counties. Let's embrace the handshake spirit to follow. Next. And the last one, I think the main problem in Kenya is the reasoning of our leaders. Most of them don't know what they are doing. They just follow the wind. I think those tweets sum up. Stephen Okoth sums up everything you've said. Thank you, gentlemen. And of course, before we end, we have to take you back in history. Let's take you back today, 30 years ago, when newspapers sold for 2 shillings and 50 cents. On this date, that's the 21st of August, 1983, Osiani, you're not born, a Nairobi-based journalist jailed a year earlier for 4.5 years for possessing a seditious publication. He sued his lawyer who represented him, claiming damages through the Law Society of Kenya. He was called Wagondu Kariuki. He accused his lawyer of professional negligence. He wrote to the LSK complaining against his lawyers, that is Ken Mijungu of Munoru and Njugi Advocates, for withdrawing an appeal from the High Court against his instructions. Of interest to us tonight is that Wagondu's appeal was later taken up by one Mirugi Kariuki, who suffered as a result of representing him in court. Now, in 1982, he ran for election for Nakuru North constituency and was rigged out by then President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. Even though he won that election, at one time he was arrested and detained for communicating with a person under lawful custody. Now that person in question was his client, the same guy, Wagondu. When he was arrested, and to humiliate him, now the police put him, Mirugi Kariuki, in the same cell with the client. He served for 5 months. Very interesting. During the active case, he was released at 9 a.m. after serving for 5 months, while judgment was read at 11 a.m., acquitting him of all charges. 9/11. Of course, he was already home by that time. This case was well before the 1982 attempted coup, and the late Wagondu Kariuki was the first case of sedition to be convicted. The lawyer in question is Mirugi Kariuki, a former member of parliament, human rights attorney and human rights activist. He later became a top government official when the opposition won the presidential election in 2002. That was Mwai Kibaki. He died in a plane crash while serving in the office as an assistant minister of internal security. A good place to end. Thank you very much for watching Sidebar. Let's do this again next week on Tuesday. I'm Ken Mijungu on behalf of everyone, my crew. Good night. Next week on Tuesday.